It's a mystery.
The eve of June 11th, 1962, was like any other on an island north of San Francisco, California. The darkness covered the sky like a child wrapped in a warm blanket. Beyond the sounds of waves crashing upon rock emanating from the coast, the halls of the nearly impenetrable structure located in the center of the island lay incredibly silent. This solitary location is one of which the most vile, law-breaking individuals inhabit, Alcatraz Island. With over 1,500 total prisoners that had the misfortune of being a resident at the location, also known as the Rock, a handful attempted to escape to the mainland. Either suffering recapture, gunshot wounds, or drowning, no one could ever claim success on their daring attempt. That we can confirm. Nearly all of the prisoners were deep in slumber on their small, worn cot that evening. The exception was 4 individuals. These men had other plans than getting their nightly dose of rest for rejuvenation on the seemingly infinite stay within the decrepit facility. This was the night they were each planned to taste the sweet pleasure of freedom. Careful planning, diligent preparation, and immense patience was required by each one of them to have the golden opportunity for the escape. Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and Alan West were ready to make history on this mid-June evening. The 4 men had ties prior to being relocated to Alcatraz. Each of them had committed multiple criminal offenses and jailed in various parts of Georgia and Florida. They had crossed paths and forged relationships. Weeks before the Great Escape, the 4 men had collaborated to determine the method they would use to break out of the rock. Using what materials they could get their hands on, they shaped them to their best of ability as tools to begin to loosen the air vent section of their cells. The tools even included a drill in which they forged out of a broken vacuum cleaner. Once enough holes were created within the vents, the supporting wall could be removed, allowing each inmate to slip through an unguarded utility corridor. Following the hallway, each member had access to the roof of their assigned cells. They had designated spaces that they used as their workshops where they could fashion the items they needed for their escape. Each night leading up to June 11th, one of the 4 would stay awake, keeping a watchful eye on the guards patrolling the cell blocks. As the clicking of the guards' footsteps started to fade as they completed their last round of the evening, the 4 men would uncover their passageways from their respective cells, traverse their way with materials they acquired throughout the day to the workshop, and continue their work. Their goal was simple: to manufacture a boat to utilize their means of transportation off of the wretched island. Frank Morris, who is known to be extremely intelligent, discovered how to craft a working boat out of the same materials raincoats were made. The inmates had access to books and other reading materials during the day. Guards would tear out and remove any pages that depicted violence, sex, or other harmful material prior to dispersal. Luckily, the article in the magazine requested by Morris had the article intact on how to build the aforementioned watercraft. While the raft, life preservers, and other vital materials were being constructed each night, the men also spent time on scouting their exit strategy, what pathways could be seen by guards, obstacles that they would have to clear, and the ideal location to place the boat. After weeks of preparation and hard work, the men were ready to get off the rock into their new lives. The evening of June 11th, 1962, the Lights Out initiative was executed, and inmates were ordered to turn in for the night. While the majority of prisoners lay down in their old worn cots and closed their eyes to retire, Morris, West, and the Anglin brothers began their long-awaited plan. Each one planted a dummy in their cots to give the appearance of them peacefully resting. The dummies were crafted out of plaster, with a flesh-tone paint job and actual hair that they had cut and gathered by each one of the men. One by one, each man quietly slid through their man-made escape hatch and would meet in the corridor. As Morris made his way to the hallway, he noticed that only the Anglin brothers were present. Morris ran back to check on West, but the vent was stuck and was not able to be removed to the point where he could fit through the crevice. Morris shook his head, shrugged his shoulders at West, who anyone within 100 meters could see the utter disappointment and dejection in his eyes. Morris turned and ran back to the rendezvous with the Anglin brothers. West would be left behind and remain within his 5-by-9-foot cramped cell. The remaining 3 gathered all their handcrafted gear and supplies from their makeshift workshop. From there, they would climb up a series of pipes that led to a ventilation that would exit to the roof of the prison. As each man cleared the ventilation shaft, they took their first initial breath of the salty, cool breeze. The taste of freedom was near. They made haste and began to work their way down the rusted smokestack attached to the bakery, the one spot that was blind to the guard towers and spotlights. As they made their way to the ground, the three continued on their path to avoid being seen. The next obstacle was a perimeter fence that stood 3.5 meters and laced with barbed wire. As they did throughout the expedited journey, in a single fashion, each man climbed the caged barrier, trying to mitigate the damage that barbed wire causes on flesh. The men were able to evade significant wounds to their limbs as they rapidly descended back to the dirt-covered surface. Morris and the Anglin brothers ran as quickly as their legs could carry them, arms full of their homemade raft, oars, and life jackets. Making it to the northeast part of Alcatraz, they cast their raft into the San Francisco Bay and set for freedom. The dawn of June 12, 1962, came with a sunrise that would bathe the island in natural brightness. The guards would begin their daily morning rounds, waking each inmate for breakfast. As the rounds brought them to the cells of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, no response or movement was provided. The guard opened the cell and reached his hand to physically shake Morris awake. He quickly discovered that Morris had been replaced by a replica. Frantically, he unlocked the cells of the brothers and quickly learned the same had been executed just as Morris's cell. The guard would sound the alarm and notify his team that the three men were missing. As word traveled through the various law enforcement agencies, a manhunt for Morris and the Anglin brothers was underway. Investigations took place to the island while the United States Coast Guard would scour the waters in attempts to find any clues that would lead to the whereabouts of the escaped convicts. Over the next 9 days, the Coast Guard would find various pieces of evidence, potentially linking them back to Morris and the Anglin brothers. A paddle, shreds of raincoat, and a deflated man-made life jacket made of raincoat material were found throughout the bay. Even a wallet with contents linking back to one of the Anglin brothers was discovered off the shores of Angel Island, which was just north of Alcatraz. Despite the collection of items, no bodies were discovered that was confirmed to be any of the three escapees. The Federal Bureau of Investigation learned that Alan West was involved with the plot to escape the fortified island. After investigation of West, with his full cooperation, possibly of scorn and hatred that the men actually left him behind, he outlined each detail of the plan. Considering all the information and evidence, along with the fact that the bay waters posed violent behaviors and the temperatures that virtually any human could not survive in for the duration the men would be at sea, the FBI concluded in 1979, over 20 years since the events took place, the men failed at their well-manned escape and either drowned or suffered from hypothermia. The case was transferred to the U.S. Marshal Service, and it's still open today. The warrant remains open until 2030, which would put Morris and the Anglin brothers at least 100 years old, if they somehow survived throughout the years. As for Alan West, he was moved around to several prison facilities once Alcatraz was ordered to be shut down in 1963 by General Robert Kennedy. While in a Florida state prison, West attacked a fellow inmate with a weapon, which resulted in the death of that individual. Charged with murder and carrying a life sentence, Alan West suffered acute peritonitis and died in 1978. This is an inflammation in the abdomen which causes bacteria buildup. Since the case hit the U.S. Marshal Service desk, numerous reports and rumors surfaced on the whereabouts of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Even with witnesses seeing Morris in Maryland, to Clarence Anglin in Brazil, and mysterious Christmas cards that were being sent to the Anglin family, no actual hard evidence was found by officials. Every call or lead provided simply turned out to be a dead end. What do you think? Did Frank Morris, John Anglin, or Clarence Anglin make it out of the unforgiving waters that night on June 11th? Are they somehow still alive to this very day? Or did they fail just like the other handful of convicts that attempted to escape the rock? It remains one of the greatest mysteries of the last century. Please be sure to like and subscribe this video. Also, check out our Patreon. This will include show notes, additional photos, other information, and upcoming episodes.